It was early morning in a quiet town where the air still smelled of night rain. Soft clouds covered the sky like a thin blanket. In a small house, at the end of a silent street, lived a young woman who had always believed that music was not just sound. It was a voice, a memory, and sometimes a secret door to places the heart did not know how to describe. She sat by her window with her instrument resting gently in her lap. It looked old, simple, a little worn out, and nothing about it suggested greatness to anyone except her. Her grandmother had played it years before she was even born, and every note held a story that made the instrument feel alive. From outside the window, she could hear distant morning activity. Children were walking to school with sleepy eyes. Shopkeepers were lifting shutters, and bicycles rolled along uneven roads. The world was waking up slowly, but she had been awake for hours. She always woke before sunrise, because that was when her music felt closest to her heart. The early light fell across the strings, and when she touched them, the soft vibration felt like a whisper from the past. Her neighbors often wondered why she spent so much time playing something they called to simple, they said, modern instruments. And digital sounds were the real future of music. They said her melodies were plain, old-fashioned, and without excitement. Some laughed kindly, believing she would eventually change and move on to something more current. Others whispered that she was wasting her talent. But she never believed their words, because she did not play to impress them. She played because the music gave meaning to her days. Like breathing, like thinking, like being alive. Her home was small and filled with memories. The walls held framed photos of her family, her parents smiling at her school award ceremony, her grandmother holding the very instrument she now carried, and pictures from birthdays, sports days, and simple gatherings. Nothing luxurious, nothing dramatic, but these pictures reminded her of warmth and belonging. On the table beside her bed sat a handwritten letter her grandmother had left for her years ago. It said, "Play with your heart, not your hands." She had read those words 1,000 times. They were the reason she never gave up. When she played, she did not chase perfect technique. She chased feeling. She believed music should make people feel something, even if they did not understand it. Many times, she practiced late into the night, letting her fingers explore familiar melodies that she had shaped through years of practice. Some melodies came from memories of sitting with her grandmother in the old garden. Others came from simple moments, rain falling, wind moving through trees, or children laughing nearby. Her parents supported her quietly. They did not push her to be famous or rich. They did not demand success. They simply smiled when she played and reminded her that meaning was more important than applause. But still, they saw the world outside. They saw how people ignored her music, how they believed her dream was not practical. They never said it aloud, but she sometimes saw worry in their eyes. Not because they did not trust her talent, but because they wanted her life to be easier. This morning, like every morning, she placed her fingers gently on the strings and let a familiar tune flow out. The melody was slow and peaceful, like a river moving under warm sunlight. Her eyes closed without effort, and her breathing grew softer. She did not think of anything else. Not fear, not doubt, not judgment. Just music. The notes filled the quiet room and drifted into the open window. A small bird landed on the tree outside and seemed to listen. It did not move away. It stayed, its head tilted, almost curious. She smiled at the sight, and her tune softened even more. She knew the people around her did not understand why she loved this instrument so deeply. They only heard simplicity, but she heard stories, memories, and emotions that could not be written. Each note reminded her of her grandmother's hands, gently guiding hers as a child. Each vibration reminded her that the past had not disappeared. It lived inside the music. She had always been shy in front of crowds. The idea of performing in public frightened her. She imagined people whispering about her lack of skill, laughing at her old-fashioned style, or smiling politely without meaning. So she had never performed outside family gatherings. She stayed inside her small world, comfortable with silence and acceptance. But deep inside, she hoped that one day someone would truly listen. Not to judge her ability, but to hear the heart behind the sound in the town. People liked loud music with flashing lights and fast beats. They wanted entertainment, not reflection. They wanted something they could dance to or record for social media. Her music was different. It asked listeners to slow down, to breathe, to remember. Many people did not want that. They called it boring. They called it strange. They called it simple. Those words used to hurt her. She would walk through the market hearing someone say, "She still plays that small thing." Or why does she not try something better? She never answered because she did not want conflict. Instead, she smiled politely and continued walking. She told herself that music was not a competition, it was a connection. If one person in the whole world found comfort in her melody, she would be satisfied. On this particular morning, she sat thinking about the future. Her heart held both hope and fear. She wondered if she would ever share her music with people she did not know. She imagined playing in a community hall, at a wedding, or even in another city. It seemed impossible, but the thought did not leave her. She could feel something changing inside her, an urge to step out, to let the world hear what she carried within. She took a deep breath and continued playing. The melody was full of emotion, stronger than usual. Her fingers shook slightly as memories returned. Her grandmother sitting near the fire, humming old songs, smiling at her attempts to match the rhythm. Those memories kept her grounded. They reminded her that greatness was not always loud. Sometimes it came quietly, like a whisper that grew into a storm. As she played, someone walking past her house stopped. It was an elderly woman from the neighborhood. She stood outside the window listening, holding her bag close to her chest. She did not speak, but her eyes softened. When the music ended, the woman smiled and continued on her way. That small moment filled the young musician with unexpected warmth. If one person could pause their morning just to listen, maybe others would too. She set the instrument down and stretched her tired fingers. The room felt brighter now. She walked to the kitchen, where her mother was preparing breakfast. The smell of warm bread filled the air. Her mother smiled at her and said, "Your music woke me up today. It made me feel calm." Those simple words stayed with her longer than any compliment ever had. She sat down to eat and noticed how her parents exchanged glances. They knew she was thinking deeply about something, but they did not pressure her to speak. She appreciated that silence. After breakfast, she cleaned her instrument carefully, as if preparing it for something important. As the day passed, she helped her parents with chores, visited a nearby shop, and walked through the town. People greeted her politely, but she still sensed the unspoken judgment in their eyes. They saw her dream as unrealistic, but she was not angry with them. She understood that people feared things they did not understand. She believed that one day, maybe soon, they would see her music differently. She felt something inside her shifting, a quiet courage she had never known before. That evening, she stepped outside with her instrument and sat on the front step. The sky was painted orange and pink. Children laughed in the distance, and soft wind moved through the trees. She began to play again, letting her notes mix with the sounds of nature. A young boy walking past stopped and stared. He had never heard music that made him feel calm before. He listened for a long moment before smiling shyly and saying, "That sounded really nice." She thanked him gently and he ran off. It was such a small moment, but to her, it felt huge. When night finally fell, she returned to her room and placed the instrument back in its resting place. She looked at her grandmother's picture and whispered, "I will not stop." That night, she did not dream of fame or applause. She dreamed of people sitting together, listening, remembering, and feeling peace. She dreamed of a day when the world would understand that her music, though simple, was unforgettable. The town was preparing for its annual community festival. A small event filled with laughter, local food, and music from nearby bands and school groups. Everyone knew the festival was loud, energetic, and full of performances that were impressive and flashy. But she felt a quiet hope rising inside her. She had decided to try something she had never done before, playing in public outside her home. Just the thought made her heart race and her palms sweat, but she felt a strange sense of determination. Perhaps it was time to let the world hear her music. She carefully carried her instrument in its worn case and walked slowly toward the festival grounds. The streets were already busy. Children ran in colorful clothes, parents held shopping bags, and townspeople set up stalls decorated with flowers and hand-painted signs. Her fingers brushed against the case as if seeking reassurance. She took a deep breath, thinking of her grandmother's words, "Play with your heart, not your hands." When she reached the small stage at the center of the festival, she paused. Musicians with bright instruments were tuning their guitars, drummers tapped impatiently, and the crowd chatted excitedly. The energy around her was overwhelming, but she tried to calm herself. She found a quiet corner on the edge of the stage, opened the case, and slowly took out her instrument. It looked simple, almost fragile compared to the instruments around her. A few people nearby noticed her and whispered, curious but skeptical. Some smiled politely, while others shook their heads, expecting nothing remarkable. She began to play. At first, the notes were soft, almost hesitant. She closed her eyes and let the melody flow naturally, as she had practiced countless times alone. The music was slow and gentle, a stark contrast to the upbeat songs filling the festival. Some people stopped, tilting their heads, unsure of what to make of it. A few laughed softly, muttering about how simple it sounded, but she did not falter. She played with every memory, every emotion, every story she had ever held. As the minutes passed, something unexpected happened. A man in his 70s, leaning on a cane, stepped closer. He had tears in his eyes, and his face softened as he listened. When she finished the first melody, he approached carefully, his voice trembling. "That was beautiful," he said. "It reminded me of someone I lost a long time ago. Thank you for bringing them back to me." Her heart jumped. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Usually people judged her music as plain or simple, but this man had felt something profound. She realized that her music did not need to be complex to touch someone deeply. For the first time, she understood that the value of her playing was not in how it looked, but in how it was felt. Encouraged, she continued playing. The crowd around her grew slowly. Some stopped to watch, curious. Children sat on the ground, fascinated by the unusual sound. Parents tilted their heads, listening carefully. The notes floated across the festival, weaving through laughter and chatter, gently demanding attention. It was as if the music had a quiet magic of its own. A woman selling handmade crafts paused, her hands stilling on a basket of painted mugs. "I didn't expect this," she said softly. "It's so calm. I feel like I can breathe again." Others nodded, and a small hush fell over part of the crowd. Even the musicians on stage glanced over, some smiling in surprise. Appreciating the raw emotion she conveyed, she continued to play, letting the music grow stronger and more confident with each note. Memories of her grandmother guided her fingers. She remembered sitting in the garden as a child, humming quietly as her grandmother taught her the first few songs. She remembered rainy days when the instrument kept her company. She remembered nights when she felt lonely and music was the only friend that understood her. Those memories filled her playing with warmth, with honesty, with truth. The festival carried on, but a small space around her became almost sacred. People whispered, shared glances, and stayed longer than they intended. Her music did not compete with the lively environment. It created its own space, quiet and intimate. For the first time, she felt what it meant to play, not just for herself, but for others, to offer a piece of her heart without expecting anything in return. After she finished, the elderly man returned, shaking her hand gently. "You have a gift," he said. "Keep sharing it. The world needs your music." She smiled, feeling her chest swell with warmth. The crowd began to clap politely, and though it was not loud or wild, it was sincere. The moment was small, but for her, it felt monumental. She packed up her instrument, heart still racing, but with a newfound courage. The whispers around her changed from doubt to curiosity. Children waved, asking her to play again. Adults nodded and smiled, some approaching to ask where she had learned to play. She realized that even the simplest music could create connections, spark emotions, and leave a mark. Later, walking home, she reflected on the experience. Her hands felt tired, but her heart felt light. She had faced the fear of performing publicly and discovered something important. People might not always understand her style, but someone, somewhere, would feel the depth of her music. That thought brought her a quiet joy, sensed that she was moving in the right direction. That night she sat by her window again, looking at the stars, holding her instrument close. She thought about the festival, about the people who had stopped to listen, and about the elderly man whose eyes had glistened with memories. She realized that her music was not about impressing others or following trends. It was about honesty, about feeling, about creating moments that lingered in the heart. She wrote a small note in her diary. Today, I learned that simple things can touch souls. My music is small, but it matters. She placed the diary beside her instrument, knowing that tomorrow she would play again, perhaps for more people, perhaps for just one listener. The world was bigger than her small town, and the possibilities began to feel endless. Her journey had started quietly, in her room, but now it had begun to reach beyond her walls. She knew challenges would come, that some people would never understand, and that there would be doubts. But for the first time, she felt the courage to continue. The simple melodies she had always loved could indeed become something unforgettable. She played them with her heart. And as she drifted to sleep that night, the soft echoes of her music lingered, like whispers that promised the beginning of a remarkable journey. After her first public performance at the festival, a new world seemed to open before her. She felt an unusual mixture of excitement and nervousness. Knowing that the world outside her home could both reject and embrace her music, she had tasted the possibility of connection, and now she wanted more. But she also knew that growth would require patience, dedication, and courage. The next day, she returned to her small room, instrument in hand, and started to practice with a new intensity. She explored melodies she had never tried before, experimenting with harmonies and rhythms that came naturally to her heart. Each note carried layers of emotion, memories of her grandmother, of quiet mornings, of moments when music had been the only companion she could trust. She discovered that the more she let her feelings guide her, the more alive the music felt. Her parents noticed the change in her demeanor. She walked with a little more confidence, spoke more about her plans, and carried a gentle glow of hope. They did not ask questions, but they silently supported her, proud that she was pursuing something she loved so deeply. The house felt lighter, filled with melodies that floated from her room into every corner. She started recording short clips of her music on her small phone, unsure if anyone would care to see them. At first, the videos went unnoticed. She uploaded them to a simple online platform, sharing them with friends and family. The few comments were polite but lukewarm. Yet she did not feel discouraged. She reminded herself that music was not about instant recognition. It was about reaching hearts, even if only one heart listened and understood. Days passed, and then one evening, a stranger shared her video online with a caption that called her sound calm and real. Overnight, the video began to spread. People started commenting about how the music made them feel peaceful, helped them focus while studying, or calmed their nerves after stressful days. Messages poured in from places she had never imagined, faraway cities, countries she had only read about in books. Her music was being heard beyond her small town. She could hardly believe it. The simple melodies she had always considered private and personal were now touching strangers' lives. Her heart swelled with gratitude and amazement. She realized that the world often overlooked quiet talent, but that did not make it any less powerful. The simplicity of her music was its strength. It spoke to something fundamental, something human, that words often could not reach. As her online presence grew, she began receiving invitations to perform at local gatherings, small cafes, and community events. She felt both thrilled and anxious. Performing in front of strangers was a different experience from playing at home. She worried about mistakes, about judgment, about whether people would truly listen or dismiss her. As they had in the past, The first invitation she accepted was to play at a small coffee house in the nearby town. It was cozy, filled with warm lights, the smell of coffee, and people chatting softly. When she arrived, she saw other musicians setting up elaborate instruments and equipment. They played energetic, flashy songs that filled the room with sound and excitement. She felt her nerves tighten. But she reminded herself of her grandmother's words, "Play with your heart, not your hands." She stepped onto the small stage, instrument in hand, and looked at the audience. They were strangers, many of whom had come for the other performers. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. The first notes were soft, delicate, almost hesitant, but as the melody flowed, she felt herself connecting with the room. The chatter faded, people leaning forward, listening. Letting her music reach them, a young woman in the audience closed her eyes, tears forming as memories of her own childhood surfaced. An older man rested his chin on his hand, nodding slowly to the rhythm. Children sat cross-legged on the floor, mesmerized by the gentle vibrations. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a long moment before applause erupted, not loud or flashy, but genuine and heartfelt. Her confidence began to grow. She realized that the depth of her music mattered more than its complexity. She did not need to play fast or impress with technique. She only needed to be honest, to convey the emotion she carried inside. The audience felt that honesty, and it resonated. Encouraged by this experience, she continued to play in different places, each time learning, growing, and connecting. The more she performed, the more she understood the subtle power of simplicity. People shared stories of how her music helped them through difficult times, reminded them of loved ones, or simply gave them peace in a noisy world. Each story strengthened her resolve, but with growth came challenges. Some performances did not go as smoothly. Occasionally, she played for people who did not understand, who whispered and judged. Sometimes the videos she uploaded received harsh comments. At first she felt the sting, the doubt creeping in. But she remembered the moments of connection, the messages of gratitude, the faces of those who had truly listened. She learned to focus on what mattered and let go of what did not. In her small room, she began experimenting more boldly, trying variations. Blending old melodies with her own interpretations, she played for hours, refining her technique and finding new emotional depths. Friends and neighbors who once dismissed her music now asked to hear it again. Noticing the growth and sincerity in her sound, one afternoon, she received a message from someone. She had never met a music teacher from another city. The teacher praised her style, describing it as soulful and authentic, and asked if she could share her story with students to inspire them. She felt a surge of pride, not for fame, but for the chance to influence others positively, to show that authenticity mattered more than complexity. This turning point helped her realize that her journey was no longer just about her. Her music could touch lives, inspire others, and perhaps even change the way people understood simplicity. She started planning to share more, to record longer pieces, to connect with listeners beyond her town. Her days became a balance of practice, recording, and small performances. She wrote down her experiences, noting which melodies seemed to resonate most, which moments of silence carried the most emotion. Every day brought new lessons, and every interaction deepened her understanding of the delicate power of music. She felt herself becoming more patient, more confident, more attuned to the subtleties of life. As the months passed, she noticed something remarkable. People who had once ignored her music now sought it out. Friends, family, strangers, all began recognizing the value of her style. They began to understand that what was simple to the eye could be profound to the heart. She realized that the simplicity that had once been a source of doubt was now her defining strength. Through every challenge and every small victory, she held on to her grandmother's wisdom. Her journey was not about becoming famous or mastering every technique. It was about being true, honest, and willing to let her music speak. She discovered that real impact came not from spectacle, but from connection. One evening, as she sat by her window playing a quiet melody, she thought about how far she had come. From a small room in a quiet town, 2 videos shared across cities. Two strangers feeling her music deeply, she had started with nothing but her heart and a simple instrument. The journey had not been easy, but it was unfolding in ways more meaningful than she could have imagined, and so she continued. Day after day, letting her music evolve naturally, guided by emotion, memory, and intuition. Every note played became a bridge between her world and the world of others. The simple instrument she had once believed ordinary was now a vessel of stories, feelings, and hope. She had learned that perseverance, honesty, and the courage to keep sharing could turn even the quietest melody into something unforgettable. The invitation arrived unexpectedly on a crisp morning, delivered through an email that made her hands tremble. A large charity event in a nearby city had seen her online performances and wanted her to play. The thought of performing in front of hundreds of people in a large hall made her both excited and anxious. She knew this would be the biggest audience she had ever faced, and the idea of standing on a stage surrounded by professional musicians was intimidating. Yet, beneath the nervousness, a spark of determination ignited. She had come so far, and now it was time to embrace this new challenge. She spent the next few weeks preparing more than she ever had before. She practiced early in the morning, late at night, and even during quiet moments in between. Every note was examined, every transition refined, and every melody infused with her emotions. Her parents watched her quietly, offering encouragement in subtle ways, a cup of tea left by her side, a smile of reassurance, a gentle reminder that her music was her gift, no matter the audience. When the day finally arrived, she carried her instrument carefully in its worn case, feeling the weight not just of the instrument, but of all the dreams, hopes, and fears that accompanied her. The city was bustling, bright with lights and noise, a stark contrast to the quiet streets of her town. The hall was enormous, filled with people in elegant attire, waiting for the evening's performances. The energy was palpable, almost overwhelming, and for a moment, doubt crept in. Could her simple music compete here? Could it even be heard amid so many grand performances? Backstage, she saw the other musicians preparing. They had elaborate instruments, flashy outfits, and confident smiles. They seemed like professionals in every sense, and she felt a pang of intimidation. But then she remembered the elderly man at the festival who had told her that her music had moved him. She remembered the messages from strangers who had been touched by her melodies. And she remembered her grandmother's words, "Play with your heart, not your hands." When it was her turn, she stepped onto the stage, her fingers brushing the strings as she adjusted her instrument. The lights were bright, the hall silent, and the audience staring with curiosity. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were gentle, soft, almost fragile. But as she continued, the music grew stronger, infused with every emotion she had carried within her all these years. At first, the audience was quiet, unsure what to make of this simple, gentle melody. They had come to see elaborate performances, but now the sound filled the hall with a different kind of energy, calm, emotional, sincere. People shifted in their seats, some closing their eyes, others leaning forward to listen more closely. Children, who had been restless, sat still, captivated by the warmth of the music. Even the professional musicians backstage stopped their tuning. Listening as the notes floated across the hall, she played with all her heart, letting the memories of her grandmother guide each movement of her fingers. She thought of quiet mornings, rainy afternoons, lonely nights, and the small victories she had celebrated alone in her room. Each note carried a piece of her story, a piece of her soul, and it reached the audience in ways she had never imagined. The melody was slow, soft, and simple, but it resonated deeply, creating a connection that went beyond technique or showmanship by the time she finished. The hall was completely silent for a long, breathtaking moment. No one moved, no one spoke. And then slowly, applause began. It started with a few scattered claps, then grew louder, stronger, until the entire hall was filled with appreciation. People stood, some wiping tears from their eyes, others smiling with a mix of surprise and joy. The organizers were speechless, and even the other musicians nodded in respect. Her simple music had stolen the night. Afterwards, she was approached by several people who had been in the audience. They shared their stories, telling her how her music had reminded them of lost loved ones, brought them peace in stressful moments, or inspired them to reconnect with their own creativity. The words were overwhelming, and she realized that her simple playing, the kind that others had once dismissed, had the power to touch lives profoundly. The experience changed her. She understood that simplicity was not weakness, that her unique style could resonate in a world that often sought complexity. She realized that staying true to her heart, embracing her emotions, and playing honestly was more important than trying to fit into expectations. This moment, in this grand hall, validated all the quiet hours, the practice, the doubt, the perseverance. After the event, her music began reaching even wider audiences. Videos from her performance were shared online, garnering thousands of views. Comments poured in, praising her authenticity, the calming effect of her music, and the emotional depth that could be felt in every note. People wrote that they felt inspired to play, create, and embrace simplicity in their own lives. The world, it seemed, was beginning to understand her, back in her small room. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of her grandmother, her parents, the elderly man from the festival, and all the strangers who had listened to her videos. She realized that her music had never truly been about recognition. It had always been about connection, about offering pieces of her heart to those willing to listen. And now, she had discovered that even in a large hall, among strangers and professionals, that connection could flourish. She continued to practice, not to impress, but to deepen her understanding of her craft. She experimented with new melodies, explored variations of old tunes, and sought to let her feelings guide her hands. Every day became an opportunity to grow, to touch lives, and to embrace the authenticity that had always defined her music. The instrument, simple and worn, remained a constant companion, carrying not just sound, but memories, emotions, and dreams. With each performance, each message, and each connection, she became more aware of her own strength. She had faced doubt, fear, and the skepticism of others, yet she had persevered. She had learned that being true to oneself, even in the face of judgment, could lead to moments of extraordinary beauty. Her music, once dismissed as simple, had become a vessel for emotion, understanding, and hope. In the days that followed, she received invitations to perform at other events, both small and large. But she remained grounded, remembering that the core of her music was honesty, not spectacle. She chose carefully, performing where her melodies could reach hearts rather than seeking fame or accolades. Each performance was a continuation of her journey, an opportunity to share what she had learned and to touch lives in ways that words alone could not. At home, she continued to practice in quiet moments, letting the music flow naturally, guided by her emotions. She played for herself, for her parents, for the memories of her grandmother, and for the audience she hoped to reach. The simple notes, gentle rhythms, and heartfelt melodies became a source of strength and fulfillment, reminding her that authenticity was more powerful than any elaborate technique. And so, the young musician who had once been dismissed as ordinary stepped into a world that began to recognize her gift. Her music, simple yet profound, had become unforgettable. She had learned that courage, perseverance, and a heart open to connection could transform even the quietest melody into an experience that resonated deeply. The stage, the audience, and the applause were not the goal, they were the result of staying true to herself, of trusting that simplicity, honesty, and emotion could create something timeless. That night, she returned to her room, the city lights twinkling in the distance. She placed her instrument carefully on its stand, feeling the satisfaction of a journey that had only just begun. She thought about the people she had touched, the stories she had heard, and the connections she had made. She realized that her music had a life of its own, carrying whispers of emotion, memory, and hope to every listener willing to pause and hear. She sat by the window, looking at the stars, and played a soft melody that filled the room with warmth. The journey was far from over, but she felt ready. Her music, simple and honest, had proven its power, and she knew that with each note she played, each story she told through her instrument. She was leaving a mark that could not be forgotten. After the unforgettable performance at the charity event, her life began to change in ways she had never anticipated. Invitations to perform reached her inbox almost daily. Yet she remained humble, carefully selecting events where her music could make a difference rather than seeking fame or money. Her focus stayed on the connection her music created, not the applause or recognition. Each performance was an opportunity to share a piece of her heart with the world. Back home, her small town began to notice the impact she was having beyond its borders. People who had once dismissed her music as too simple now looked at her with admiration and curiosity. Children came by to watch her play, eager to learn the melodies that had captivated audiences far away. Local musicians who had once doubted her talent now approached her for advice or collaboration. It was a gentle shift, almost imperceptible at first, but it filled her with quiet satisfaction. She spent her days practicing, exploring new variations of her melodies, and reflecting on the stories that her music inspired. Every note carried emotion, every pause held meaning, and every melody created a bridge between herself and those who listened. She continued to record videos, share them online, interact with her growing audience who eagerly awaited each new piece. The messages she received were heartfelt. People wrote about how her music helped them focus, reminded them of loved ones, or simply brought peace after a long day. Despite her growing recognition, she remained grounded. She did not let the attention distract her from the core of her music, its simplicity and honesty. She knew that the magic lay not in complexity or technique, but in the emotions conveyed through her playing. She often recalled her grandmother's advice, repeating it silently as she practiced: "Play with your heart, not your hands." That phrase became her guiding principle, the touchstone that reminded her why she began this journey in the first place. One day, she received a letter from a music school in a distant city. The letter praised her style and invited her to speak and play for a class of students. The opportunity was daunting, but she accepted, seeing it as a chance to inspire young musicians. She wanted to show them that talent did not have to be flashy to be meaningful, and that authenticity and persistence could leave a lasting impact. The journey to the city was long, but it gave her time to reflect. She thought about the elderly man from the festival, the strangers who had connected with her videos, and the quiet moments of practice in her room. Every challenge she had faced, every doubt she had endured, had prepared her for this moment. She realized that her music was not just her own, it belonged to anyone willing to listen, to feel, and to carry the emotions forward at the music school. She was greeted warmly, yet she sensed the skepticism in some of the students' eyes. They had been trained to value technique, speed, and complexity. Her instrument looked simple in comparison to the advanced tools around her. She took a deep breath, recalling the countless hours she had spent preparing. She closed her eyes and began to play. The first notes were soft, carrying her usual gentle rhythm. Gradually, the music filled the room, wrapping around the listeners like a comforting embrace. Students paused, fingers hovering over their own instruments. Teachers leaned in, listening intently. The simple melody, rich with emotion and sincerity, captured the attention of everyone present. By the time she finished, silence hung in the room, heavy with awe and reflection. Then applause followed, genuine and heartfelt. As the students and teachers expressed their appreciation, afterward, many approached her, sharing their thoughts and gratitude. They spoke of how her music reminded them of forgotten emotions, how it encouraged them to embrace their own authentic voices, and how they now understood that simplicity could carry profound depth. She felt a warmth in her heart, knowing that her music had inspired others to think differently, to value emotion over technical showmanship. Returning home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the quiet streets of her town to stages across cities, from videos watched by strangers to inspiring students, she had traveled far. Yet, the essence of her music remained unchanged. She played with her heart, remained true to herself, and let the melodies tell their own stories. The simple instrument, worn with years of practice, remained her constant companion, carrying her emotions and memories. Her growing audience, both online and in person, began to understand that her music was more than sound. It was a bridge between hearts, a gentle reminder of the beauty and simplicity, and a source of comfort and reflection. Messages from people touched her deeply. They shared stories of listening to her music during moments of grief, joy, or reflection, explaining how the melodies had accompanied them through life's quiet and loud moments alike. Through it all, she remained humble and focused. She continued to play for herself first, for her parents, for the memories of her grandmother, for the hearts that needed her music. Each performance, whether in a small room, a festival, or a large hall, was approached with care and sincerity. She understood that the power of music lay not in its grandeur, but in its ability to touch the soul. As her journey progressed, she began mentoring young musicians in her town. She taught them to play with feeling, to embrace their own styles, to understand that music was about connection, not competition. The children she taught listened attentively, inspired by her story and her gentle guidance. Her simple melodies became a foundation for a new generation, a reminder that authenticity and emotion could make a lasting impact. She also used her growing platform to support charitable causes, performing at events that helped communities, schools, and hospitals. Her music, once considered ordinary, now carried hope and healing. People began to recognize that the essence of her work was its humanity, the way it reached hearts and brought comfort without pretense or extravagance. At home, she would often sit by the window, playing quietly as the sun set. She thought about her journey, the obstacles she had faced, the moments of doubt, and the incredible people she had connected with. Each note was a reflection of her life, each melody a story told without words. She realized that her music had become a legacy, not because of fame or accolades, but because it had touched lives in a meaningful way. One evening, after a long day of performing and teaching, she received a message from a listener who had followed her journey from the beginning. The message spoke of how her music had helped them cope with loss, inspired them to pursue their own creative passions, and reminded them that simplicity could hold profound beauty. She read the message with tears in her eyes, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment and gratitude. Her parents, watching from the sidelines, could see the growth in their daughter. She had become confident, grounded, and deeply connected to the world through her music. They had supported her quietly, and now they could see that her perseverance and authenticity had created a ripple effect far beyond what anyone could have imagined. In her small town, she became a symbol of hope and inspiration. People began to understand that talent was not always flashy, and that the quiet persistence of the heart could create something truly unforgettable. Children learned from her example, aspiring to embrace their own passions with sincerity and courage. The townspeople, who had once doubted her, began to celebrate her achievements. Recognizing that her music was a gift that enriched the community and beyond, she continued to perform, to teach, and to share her story. Her life became a testament to the power of simplicity, authenticity, and persistence. She understood that success was not measured by applause or recognition alone, but by the connections she made and the emotions she evoked through her music. Each performance, each melody, and each listener became part of a larger story, a story that celebrated the beauty of honesty and heart as years passed. Her influence continued to grow, but she remained true to her beginnings. She played with the same simple instrument, guided by the same heartfelt approach, and inspired countless individuals to find their own voices. The journey that began with quiet mornings, simple melodies, and private practice had transformed into a legacy of connection, inspiration, and unforgettable music. And in the quiet moments, when she sat alone by her window, looking at the stars, she would play softly, thinking of her grandmother and the early lessons in music, heart, and life. She knew that the journey would continue, that there would always be more hearts to touch and more stories to inspire. Her music, simple yet profound, had become a timeless echo, reminding the world that authenticity and emotion could make even the simplest melody unforgettable.